We'll give the participants a couple more minutes to join, and then we'll get this started.
I wish we could have like elevator music while we wait.
I know, I think there is a feature where we can include music, but we would have to play our own music. So I don't think we can do that now, but we'll just give them another minute or two.
We'll
And
think about
yeah,
it for the next time. Yeah.
yeah, we can add some music while we wait for people to join. But no, I think we're almost ready to get started. We will get started soon. So yeah, if people in the comments on the chat, they can let us know where they're joining from, either good afternoon or good morning. I see some familiar names from people we have worked with, so that's nice to see some familiar faces. And I'm sure you guys see the same for us, familiar faces, so that's nice.
I see familiar faces and I even see some faces that I'm going to be visiting in the next couple of weeks. So that's
Right?
great.
Yeah. They'll probably be asking a lot more questions after today. They can save them for when you see them, so that's nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, while we wait for more people to attend, we can still go on to the housekeeping and some of the things that we want people to be aware for the webinar today. So similar to any other webinars you've attended in the past, there's two sections to this webinar. There's going to be the chat as we want you to interact, have your comments, thoughts, reactions. You can also react with the react button on the bottom of your Zoom. I'm sure you're familiar with it. But there's also the Q&A section where we'd really like you to submit your questions there so we make sure we don't miss any throughout the session. And I'll keep any questions that go in the comments on the chat section instead. I'll make sure to pass those on to the comments to the Q&A part. So last but not least, if you want to share this with other people, we're also live streaming on YouTube. So if you want to share that with anybody, you can do so. And they can also watch from there in case they haven't been able to join our Zoom today. All right. So before we get started, I highly, highly recommend you unplug. I recommend you switch off any notifications from either Slack, Teams, your social media. Maybe you can have some pen and paper or your notes app ready because this is going to be a once session. You're going to have the content potentially available afterwards to watch again. But this is the moment to ask the questions. So I would really take the time. There's going to be quite a lot of content to digest. So yeah, I highly recommend you unplug and listen carefully. And stay with us. As part of attending today, there's going to be a free AI glossary ebook that we're going to be sending your way. And the reason we'd like you to stay until the end, not just for this, but it's because we have a special surprise, which is going to be an announcement at the end of today's session. So if you can make it through it, you'll have a little surprise announcement at the end. All right. So today's topic, as you would have registered for it, so hopefully you're aware, the webinar you signed up to today is Artificial Intelligence for Business, a practical introduction for business professionals. It's going to last about 60 minutes. We're going to be covering around 12 topics. There is no coding background required. So there's going to be a lot of fundamentals that are going to be covered. And in that sense, it's an accessible webinar. So before we dive too deep into it, I'd like to first introduce our speaker, and then we can do a poll so we can kind of sense the temperature a little bit of everyone and where they're at with AI. So here with us today to talk about artificial intelligence for business is Marcelo Tisoni. Marcelo, do you want to say hi to everybody?
Hey everybody. Hey familiar faces. Hope everyone is doing well. Hope everyone came in ready. We're going to try to make this as clear as possible. 60 minutes, no more, no less. I understand that everyone has very busy agendas, so we don't want to take quite a lot of your time. So we'll get to it very quickly.
Nice, Marcelo. So Marcelo is our AI studio director, and he'll be covering the topics. But first, let's launch our first poll. So, what's stopping you from using AI more? It'd be really nice to sense a little bit the temperature as to what's stopping you from using AI more. Is it the lack of knowledge, the lack of time? There's an unclear return of investment. Is it security and compliance concerns? Or nothing? You feel you're already using it fully. Okay, so Marcelo, it seems we've got a bit of a mix here in terms of the answers. Some people actually are saying it's lack of time, which is an interesting one because of the benefits the tool is meant to provide. And I understand when a new tool comes into place, it takes some time to learn it, but it comes with the benefit of it afterwards, right? So we've got lack of time, which is the winner at the moment. That is stopping people from using AI more. One person did answer it's the lack of knowledge, and well, two people have said nothing. They're already using it fully, which is an interesting one because of the capacities that AI has. I don't know if I
Yeah,
totally.
it's a very interesting set of responses. I would say that lack of time is definitely one in the sense that I think that it happens for everyone, even in their own personal lives, right? You have a bunch of projects, a bunch of things that you want to do in your house, like renovate something or do anything, right? But sometimes you are not able to do it because of the time that it takes. Maybe what we can do with that is maybe not necessarily on this particular webinar, but they're going to be, I'm going to be announcing a little bit later that this is a series of webinars, right? So in some other webinars, we're going to be discussing things that you can do that are very much very quick wins that should be able to save you a little bit of time. And ideally, with that time saved, you can actually use it to invest some of that free time to actually get other things done as well. So it's just a matter of getting that ball rolling. And once you start doing it, you start gaining time so that lets you do other things. So hopefully we can do a little bit of that. And for the people that lack the knowledge, of course, this is going to be more than helpful. And even if you're already using it fully, maybe there's something else that we're able to let you know about or help out with this that it can prove useful as well. So I think we have a little bit for everyone. So thank you so much for the poll. Um, I'm going to be moving to what we're going to be covering today. But before I start, I just definitely want to be very clear about the intent of what we're going to be doing here and what we're going to be doing in the next weeks and months with this. Is we've noticed along the road that there's even in the same vein as the survey that we just did showed, there's quite a lot of different degrees of levels of knowledge and usage and everything. So from our intent, we saw that there is a need in which we can have some sort of like a leveling course in which we all make sure that we're speaking the same language, that we're speaking the same terms, that we have the same expectations of the technology, because I've seen that quite a lot. Some people really do expect some things out of it that maybe the technology is not very much meant for, but at the same time, they don't know that they can actually get some other things that the technology will do wonders for them. So really, this is about making sure that we're all speaking the same language. For the people that consider it a bit scary, that it's not that much. And yeah, so we can get the ball rolling of that. We have just a lot of topics that we will go through today, but we have some others that are going to be done in some other webinars. So if there's anything that may be missing from today, feel free to add it in the comments. And I may be able to tell you that it's already part of the curriculum of the next ones. And if I don't have it, I'll make sure to add it. So I think um, either sooner or later, everything is going to be covered. So with that said, here are the topics that we're going to be covering today. I I promise you that there are not a lot that they're very like technically complicated. And if it is something, I'll make sure to explain it very thoroughly and let you know beforehand. But you're going to do great. And let me just continue to the first one. So, your typical definition, right? What is artificial intelligence, which is the buzzword of the moment, right? So, AI is a branch of computer science that develops systems capable of performing tasks typically requiring human intelligence, such as reasoning, learning, problem solving, and perception. This is not a new term. If you want to go throughout the history of just artificial intelligence and so on and so forth, this has been going on from all the way up until the 40s. And it has been throughout the years a field in which people's interest and amount of money that was invested and overall public perception of it has gone through very ups and downs. If you start reading throughout the history of artificial intelligence, you will see that there are some actual terms that they called them like the AI winters, and now supposedly we're on an AI spring. And it has gone up and down. So, for example, in the 70s, there wasn't a lot of interest. There was quite a lot of also a decline in interest in the end of the 90s. But then from the 2000s up until now, it has gone up in temperature up to the boiling point that we're right now. But even in just the public nature of everything, we've seen, for example, Alan Turing and all of like the movies and the Imitation Game and everything, and those go back almost 100 years ago, and already then we were discussing what a potential of artificial intelligence would be. And at least, I don't know, for myself, I'm a 90s kid, right? So the first notice that I've ever got of something that it is very relevant for artificial intelligence, I remember at like the world champion of chess when I was 6 years old. He got defeated by a computer and everyone went crazy about it. And that same computer, I think it was called Deep Blue, was actually using artificial intelligence principles. It wasn't able to actually be ChatGPT at that moment, but it had quite a lot of capability. So this is nothing new. Um, but yeah, let's go to the next slide. What it is new right now are the famous large language models that we interact right now, and they're so good at it. This is basically a system that uses artificial intelligence to basically predict uh, just a natural conversation. And you can see that every time that you ask it something, it will go through a bunch of different calculations and it will appear as you're discussing basically with a real human being. These ones, if we want to be very reductive on them, they're incredible pieces of technologies. But if you want to do like a one sentence definition, they're sort of like autocompletes on steroids, which is something that we're going to be seeing just in a couple of moments. But they have learned through an incredible amount of text and information, thanks to basically the 40 years of the internet that we have. And with all of those data sets, it can actually calculate probabilities for conversations. So this is something that we're never meaning to be reductive. This is a revolutionary technology, but it's important to understand how it goes to actually have a conversation with you. It's not magic. This is the culmination of almost 100 years of studies on technology. And that's why we want to have a moment today to demystify a little bit, learns its strengths, but also some of their limitations.
So what you're saying is that LLMs are using the computer science of artificial intelligence behind. So that's why they were
Yeah,
able to be built. But the reason we're
yeah.
able to use it at such a speed now is what we're going to be talking about in this slide now.
Yeah, exactly. This is like the intersection of years of many different things that have happened. This is the perfect storm, basically, if you want to put it that way. And it's part of these three pillars. So we have an incredible amount of data. Imagine the entire internet, even the websites that you may not think that they're as good, they're still amazing for data sets, such as, I don't know, Reddit is part of the data sets, whether you think that's good or not. Um, and that is one part, all of the data, right? Then we have all of the computer power that is needed to actually process all of that data in a way that it can be done in real time and that it's fast, right? So this is the reason as of why you see a company like Nvidia going through the roof in terms of valuation, because they're very much needed for these types of things. This wouldn't be possible if we only had the data pillar and the algorithm pillar. So again, this is the perfect storm as of why this is so relevant right now, even though the theory of it has had more than 100 years. Um, so for one side is the data, the other one is that computing, and another one is just algorithms that have come out. There's one in particular, which is the transformer breakthrough, and I put it right over there. Guess what the T in GPT stands for? Yeah, you got it. So it has unlocked quite a lot of things that actually have made this possible. Um, so yeah, a lot of time has gone, a lot of luck, a lot of effort, a lot of money, uh, but all of this is feasible right now.
So it's almost to your point of we have a lot of access now to the tool. It's just how are we best making use of it, or where are we putting the parameters and the limitations around this tool? Because once we have access to such a big monster, I want to say, but not monster because it's AI is great. You're trying to basically say it can be great. We just have to be able to know how to
Well,
shape it.
right now it is already great. It just has some limitations, but I would say that we're in the space of we're getting to know each other, if you want to put it that way, in the sense that this is very new to us, so we are still learning how to use it. And again, there may be some things that we haven't used it up until now, but they will be able to be used. It's just a matter of keep iterating with it, keep making it better, keep investing in it, and just keep getting new data for which to learn. It's just a matter of continuing the cycle because if you see, um, well, this is probably the most recognizable thing that it has come out of this, but I have seen those videos of, for example, Will Smith eating spaghetti. That when AI recently started, it was horrible, but now it's very much lifelike. And that only happened in 3 years. So imagine what will happen in the next 3 years if we continue with this. So that's very important to keep in mind that just because something doesn't work right now in some specific aspects, that doesn't mean that it won't work in the future.
Exactly. And this is also a nice segue to ask, the people attending today to to what degree are they actually, or how are they currently using AI in work? Or we can also say personally, we wanted to focus this in work because we're obviously wanting to know how much are you experimenting with it? How much are you using it? Is it part of your daily life? Um, and one of the options that's not here, but it's also something that we wanted to know. So feel free to comment it, is if AI is already a part of your workflow. So if it's something that you're already using to create workflows, to create processes at work, because that's a key point in the next slide that Marcel is going to touch base on, knowing how to differentiate and when this tool is applicable in its best capacity. So we see here that there's quite a tie between experimenting occasionally and using it weekly. And this sort of ties back again to the notion of time, having the time and spending time to be creative with it too, right? To be able to experiment with it. And maybe the point of this presentation is how how it can be and where it can be applied and having the right guidance for that. So as the slides go on, the point I've just made will become more clear.
I see basically everyone is using it. just in varying degrees.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's start with probably just a distinction, just to make sure that we're in the same level playing field. So AI versus automation. I think that really a key of all of this is just determining what the tool makes sense, like to what job the tool makes sense for. There are some jobs in which a tool doesn't make sense, so it's just a matter of understanding how to differentiate them and just make sense out of it. So, for example, we always have the traditional automation, right? It's just writing those scripts, just making those customizations that if X happens, Y happens. That is something that it has been tried, true, and tested and has worked for the entire eternity since we have been doing this. It's perfect for some things. For some others, maybe it's not as much. It's a matter of understanding what is the risk that I have if the solution that I provide doesn't work. So maybe if I am, for example, in a financial environment, right, or a compliance environment, if I get it wrong one time, that can mean hundreds of thousands of dollars. It could be millions. It could be dozens of millions. Okay, maybe if I have something like that, I would probably lean more towards traditional automation that I know that every time that one input comes in, the same output will come out all of the time. But there are some other instances in which I don't need that. My margin of error is bigger and I need more creativity. I need something that can evolve and I need something that can change. In that sense, I can actually consider artificial intelligence because it is something that, given their data sets, it will actually get more context. It will give you multiple responses to something. It will actually create things from scratch. So if you ever need to do any kind of context, if you're thinking about, like, for example, retail and e-commerce, right? Everything that comes with all of my metadata, everything that it goes with image creation, item information, all of that, it can be done from scratch. And that is something that you cannot conceive with traditional automation, or at least if you could conceive it, it will probably be, it won't have as much personality if you want to put an unlikely term on it. And again, it will improve with extra data and feedback. So in that sense, you just need to know what the issue is that you're having and understanding the way that you should tackle at it. Okay, so in this case, think of your particular business, right? Which ones are the processes that run in fixed rules, and which ones require judgment? Which ones have room for error? All of the judgment ones are where AI gets interesting. And again, this is something that you will see that even if the tool has some limitations, there's quite a lot that you can do to actually mitigate them. So in that sense, don't take it as it's either or. Maybe it's both, but with some small tweaks. And if you do the tweaks, that option will be even better than the other one. So that is really something that you should take into account for every single thing that you have. There are some different types of AIs that you could potentially apply in your business. And I don't think that there is a scenario in which you won't be able to apply all of them. It's just that you will apply to different things. So you would have, for example, all of it is machine learning, you have generative AI, and then you have computer vision. Your machine learning, for example, it can be used to analyze trends from years and years and years of data that you have to actually make predictions on the future, or you can just do your forecasting, you can just do fraud detection. There's quite a lot of things that you can do for that. And that is just basically a huge data set that you've gathered over the years, and the machine goes through it and it gives you its findings. You could probably do that yourself as well, but depending on everyone's capabilities, maybe this is something that will be done in just a couple of hours with this technology, maybe 30 minutes. But maybe if you had to do just those huge data sets manually, it could be a work that takes you weeks, depending on what you're trying to do. You also have the generative AI, which is I think what everyone is most familiar as of this moment, because it's really what everyone uses when they interact with an LLM, which is basically you can use it to create new content. You can just create images, as everything that I was saying with your, for example, your item metadata and all of that. And then you have your computer vision. This one, it may seem odd to some people, but this one is also something that you could even do it. Like for example, Amazon does it on their warehouse, right? They track the routes, they make them more efficient. If you're using a warehouse and you want to just try efficiency, or maybe even you have physical stores and you want to have more efficient paths or anything, you could actually use computer vision to actually interpret hours and hours and hours of footage and come with findings out of it. It could be for anything that you put your mind into. But now, after we go through all of that, I think this is what I most wanted to tackle with this particular webinar is just going through the background of what happens when I open ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini and I ask it a question and I receive an answer, and that answer is right. That moment, which I think it's the moment for everyone that it seems like it flipped a switch in which you say, I cannot believe what just happened. I think it's important to take the time and just do a double click on it and just understand, okay, what just happened? I think in this case, it's going to illustrate quite a lot of what this is capable of. And it's even, I think it's going to give you a better background of, okay, I can use it for this, but maybe not for this as much. So this is going to be the meat of this presentation. It's going to be a bit more technical, but again, very surface level of how it goes. But to me, this is like the most important thing that you can do. Once you understand what the process is that go from the moment that you ask the question to the moment that you get an answer, that is going to be knowledge that you're going to be keeping throughout the entire rest of the webinars and courses that we're going to be doing. And you're going to take that for your life, for your business, for everything that you do. So I really hope you get to stay, take a look at it, and just be here with me. So let's say that I open uh, any of the LLMs, right? And I ask it, explain why the sky is blue. That is I don't know, any kid ever probably has asked that question. So it's something that is very normal. But how do we go about with an LLM and how do we get that answer? So the first thing that happens is that you type that in, and when you press enter, right in that moment, there is a difference in which how you view things. The computer is going to view it in one way, and the machine is going to view it in a different way. Right here, I have it separated as numbers. But the idea is that we're going to go through the process of how that number is translated into meaning and how it's translated into a response that actually makes sense. And all of these slides are going to be sent. So if there's anything in particular that I may move on very fast, don't worry, you're going to get them. So the first thing that happens is that a computer will never understand the text that we give it to. It basically, it has to transform it into something that understands. So the first thing that it does is it transforms it into, I don't know, if AI is the number one buzzword that has ever existed, I think probably token is number two or three. It has to be in the ballpark, but it is what happens, right? Tokens are the fundamental units of data. Words, part of words are punctuation, and that AI models process and generate. So as you can see right here, in which I have it noted, through tokenization, text is broken into smaller chunks, and it's roughly one token equaling 0.75 English words. This is basically what the first step into doing that translation. And what I would like to do is just a small exercise to anyone that hasn't seen this before, because I think it's very illustrative, is let's go. and open, just a second, we're going to be opening in the OpenAI platform the tokenizer, which actually allows you to learn about how a token creation works. So this is just a simulator in which you can write any kind of text and it will show you basically the equivalent tokens of that particular phrase that you've used it. So I can do explain why the sky is blue. And you will see that explain why the sky is blue is actually composed of 7 tokens. And that is when we're going to be seeing this a little bit down the road, right? But in terms of pricing structure, the token is basically the unit of cost in terms of either input and output. So it's important to know that. So the first thing that happens is that you write explain why the sky is blue, and automatically that chat model will convert it, and it will convert it to this. These are tokens that symbolize what you wrote. So that is really the first step that we need to do in order to have that computer understand what you just said to it. And again, the reason as why I'm doing this is because I think it's important to fully understand this because once we understand the strong points, we can very much understand the limitations that are associated to it. So continuing with what I was sharing, let's do this. There we go.
So
We
we have
are,
an
yeah.
interesting question, which I don't know whether we should ask it now, but maybe we do it once we talk about the output. So maybe let's finish the thought process because right now we're
Okay.
only talking about the input just to make sure that all of us with the attendees as well we're on the same page. Right now, this is only the input. We've spoken to the LLM, so to the ChatGPT or to the Claude. So far, this is only the input. We've asked, this is us typing into ChatGPT, explain why the sky is blue. And tokenizing is this being transformed into numbers. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay,
This is just the first step in the entire chain. So if we have any questions about the
cool.
output, we can definitely get
Let's
to
do, yeah.
it. Yeah. So let me move on to the next one. So now that we have everything put as a number, this is where it starts to get more interesting and complicated. So every single word, it has a meaning associated to it. But we need to find a way in which we can have those meanings and words stored in a place that a computer can actually go and access them and use them. All of those tokens initially, when they get in, every word gets put into a particular meaning box, if you want to put it that way. So for every person that writes the word man, man is stored on a particular location, king is stored in a different one, woman is stored in a different one, and queen is stored on a different one. This, for example, what I'm showing right now, it's a very famous example of how these things are theorized and how they are just determined in vector algebra and natural language processing. So it's so well placed that theoretically you can just have the word king and subtracted men and add woman, and you would get the word queen. So, for example, in those particular scenarios, you could actually do the same thing for quite a lot of different things. So, for example, JavaScript and Python, if you want to put them on a neighborhood, they will be in a very similar neighborhood. They probably be sharing the same apartment complex, if you want to follow the metaphor. Um, but that is just the first step of just how do I have this machine basically understand what I wrote and not just store random words without any kind of meaning.
And Marcelo, because I'm all about, this is very black and white, very clear. But what about more on the gray territory when it's ambiguous, if a word can have a double meaning, or if I'm talking about something and I'm referring, and I think we're going to cover this in the next slide, if I'm referring to something and later in that sentence, I don't necessarily mention that word again, if it and can we explain how that language model can translate that number wise, or how can it refer back to that?
Yes. So that's actually like one of the biggest of the three pillars that I mentioned in terms of breakthroughs. That is the one that I mentioned about the transformer. So basically, in many, many words, the meaning is very one-sided. It doesn't need quite a lot of context, and they're very much always in the same drawer, and they very much mean the same thing. But the reality is that, as with all human language, when you start adding context to it and when you put it on a sentence, that meaning gets flipped upside down and just in 100,000 different ways. So you cannot have this oversimplification that I had right here because under different circumstances, everything changes. So really what happens is the following. Let's take, for example, this sentence. The animal didn't cross the street because it was too tired. I don't think I need to ask anyone basically what it refers to. We know that it means one particular thing. But this for a computer is out of the blue. It's basically impossible to understand what it's referring to. And imagine it's maybe not necessarily on a sentence, but imagine how huge it could be if you're talking about paragraphs that are very long and they're referring to a bunch of different um, intersections of meanings. And I don't even want to get to the cultural differences and everything. It's just very important to keep context every time that I want to interpret something. And that is very much that transformer breakthrough that occurred. Um, to simplify how it works is that every single time a sentence is provided or a paragraph is provided, not every single word has an equal meaning weight. So when I see the animal didn't cross the street because it was too tired, this transformer basically gets every single one of those words and rates it in terms of importance to the sentence. And once I know which word is more important, I can understand that it is probably not the street, and it is probably not because it is not cross. It is probably referring to the animal. The important thing is that we have such huge data sets that this situation in one type of way or another, it has happened way too many times because these solutions are very good at understanding patterns. So maybe if we're not saying that particular phrase explicitly, the structure of what was interacted, it's very similar to countless other examples that it has. So it understands that it's referring to the animal. And really, this is the breakthrough that happened in terms of just the overall theory of it that has allowed you to basically type something into the chatbot and feeling like you were fully understood.
So this is the whole, it's not because it's reading your mind, it's just really good at predicting the pattern.
Yeah, it's really good at taking context from what you just said
And
to
that's where the,
understand.
yeah, that's where the
Yeah,
autocorrect on your phone, right? Like similar to when autocorrect started on your phone, you felt so relieved
yeah,
and happy that the words could be recognized and it could predict what word you wanted to put. Um,
yeah. But imagine this going entirely crazy
on
on
steroids, like you said,
steroids.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's just it goes back to what you said. It's the illusion of knowledge in the sense of this is a very basic example with knowing it referred to the animal, but we're talking this at a larger scale.
Yeah, this is a huge oversimplification, and what I'm just trying to do is even if it feels like magic, and that is incredibly powerful, and trust me, the idea is to use that feeling because we all have some customers, and the idea is that we want to use that magic to our advantage, right? We want to have that customer feel an incredible experience when they shop on our websites, and even when we're using it as an internal tool, it feels like magic and it gives you the effects of magic. But I think if you're going to harness it, if you're going to use it, know that it's just a little bit different at that. It's not exactly magic. There's years of effort that has gone into this to make it seem like it is. And yeah, again, once we know the limitations, we know where to use it and where to not use it. So we have taken care of basically that input, right? I wrote it and it understood, if you want to put it that way, but now it's the time to provide an answer. How does it get to an answer that is actually logic, that it makes sense, that it's factually accurate? Well, it does it because once it went through all of the words that you wrote, there's a mathematical probability from the data set that they were trained on to actually have one particular response. So it will know that all of the questions that are in the structure or frame of explain why X is Y, they usually are answered in a way that starts with the thing happens because. So that structure is something that it will mathematically start replicating. So it's going to start with the word D. And this is, I think, one of the parts that it's very, very interesting. It doesn't know what it's going to say other than the next word that it's going to say. So even if something is going to be, even if an answer is going to be 2 paragraphs long, when the large language model started answering it, it's only know the next word. It only knows that it's going to say the, and then when it says sky, the only thing that it knows from before is that it's a the. And that process that I just mentioned iterates as many times as possible until they reach something that is called a stop condition. Because again, when they stop talking, it's because mathematically, statistically, the most logical thing to do given their data sets is to shut up, if you want to put it that way. So you can see right here, right? You have the sky appears, and then you have, I just put 3 options, but they could be much more, and we're going to see it in the next screen. So in this case, you could say the sky appears blue. You could say the sky appears bright. You could say the sky appears cloudy. You could also say that it appears red, but that's usually when you have like fires and stuff like that. So I hope everyone is okay and they don't need to say it. But yeah, in this case, mathematically speaking, from all of the data sets and all of the context and everything, blue is the option that mathematically makes more sense. So it gets added. And in that sense, this process that I just mentioned happens for all 10 of those that I just mentioned. The only difference is that when it reached atmosphere, the most logical next step that was supposed to happen is to end the sentence. So this, what I just mentioned, is just a glimpse of how it works when you write something and you get a response and you cannot believe it. Okay, this took 100 years of work. Um, let's see how it goes for the next 5. But it's really something. When someone experiments it for the first time, it's super powerful. And even more, just to provide an example, right? I have some issues in my knees, as all adult males have probably. But I mentioned it probably 2 months ago, and the other day I've asked it for just some fitness tips, and the first thing that it mentioned was, Marcelo, remember that you have a bad knee. So that is just incredible because it also takes into account things that you have done or interactions that you've had many days or months ago. And that is something that we're going to be learning a little bit more along the way. Um, because there are quite a lot of myths that need to be dispelled in that sense. But I think it's important to understand that this is a super powerful tool. It's incredible. And here we have what I just mentioned, right? That you reached a stop condition. Now, the good thing to take, or the important thing to take into account is that it reached an accurate output. But that doesn't mean that they have a PhD in physics or atmospheric science. Those are 2 different things, right? Um, And I think that is something that is very important to understand because you will encounter some limitations, and knowing this will allow you to actually act on them and just that margin of error, make it much less noticeable. In that magical feeling that you give everyone, it's going to happen more and more.
So in that sense, this is where people have become so conscious of their prompting, right? So depending on how specific or the context of the role or the depending on how accurate you are when you speak to the LLMs, that will be the quality of what you get back because again, it's all to do with what you've just explained. It's all of this probability. So if what you're giving it, I don't want to say it because of the example we've just used, but case in
Mhm.
point, um, if what you're providing, if the information is poor, then you're probably going to get poor information back, right?
Yeah, and I think everyone speaks about it when they say in data that if you have like garbage in, garbage out. So that is very important to take into account.
Right.
And we're going to have further webinars in which the entire webinar is going to be aimed at how do we mitigate this? Because it is crucial. There's quite a lot of things that you can do. And basically, everyone that is working on this is basically working on how to avoid the scenarios in which it doesn't work to just only have scenarios that work, which again, it's incredible. So the idea is that you want to
Yeah.
replicate that.
And to make sure we don't miss the question, I know there's an excellent slide you've got coming up that talks about the loop in itself. So maybe we talk about that and then we touch base on this output question that's very fascinating. So let's cover the next slide where you talk about the token base, as in just to round it up.
Yeah. So in this case, this is a little bit of the entire flow that happens. Um, and this is on a loop, right? It repeats every time. And in some parts of it, um, it even repeats per word that you're receiving on the output, right? So basically, you get that input. That means that you write something in the chat. What you wrote gets converted into numbers. Those numbers get stored in that context or meaning neighborhood, if you want to put it that way. And something that I want to clear up on that is what I showed on the screenshot of the diagram that has the queen and the king and the man and the woman and how that works. That is extremely oversimplified. The reality is that we're talking about just millions and millions and millions of vectors and dimensions that basically it's not an X and Y kind of axis. It exists. You see it. For example, you see diagrams. I wish I could have taken one for to show you right now, but it looks like a constellation in terms of all of the words that are embedded. So in that sense, I completely oversimplified it, and I think it's very important to understand.
Yeah.
Um, we do the embedding, transform, we use that transformer that actually takes the context of what I just wrote, and then it basically goes to the probability game in which it starts deciding, okay, what I should respond. And then from the potential responses that I have, it chooses one in particular. Um, Maybe we can go to the question that you had, Pia.
Yes. So is there a way, based on all of the tokens and is there a way that I can control the tokens the model uses so I can reduce the costs in the output, in the answer? Because you know how ChatGPT, even when it happens when I'm Googling, but I know Google doesn't charge me for it. But sometimes in ChatGPT, I get such a long answer for such a simple question. So is there a way to control the tokens the model uses in its output to reduce the costs?
Yes, you can control in quite a lot of different ways. So even the LLMs, they provide you ways in which you can basically determine what is the maximum output of tokens that you can provide. And I would say that probably it has to be a combination of different factors that we're going to be touching upon on further webinars because there are quite a lot of different levers and mechanisms that you need to go about, and also just make sure that if you're reducing the amount of words. Of course, verbosity doesn't equal quality. That is very important to understand. But sometimes, forcing it and putting it limits, it could create a negative experience. But the idea is that you can control that through just you can determine a maximum output of tokens. You can, from that famous prompt engineering, you can just basically
Right.
limit or actually give it guardrails or criterias. And this is all some things that we're going to be touching upon later in other webinars, but you can actually give it structure, give it limits, but they still convey the message and you still get that reduced amount. Another thing that happens is specifically this is in the part of the sampling. So
Yeah.
when you get when you go through those probabilities, right? And you get what is the next word that I can provide? You see in the example I gave a little bit before, right? You could say that the sky is blue, but also at the same time you could say that the sky is cloudy. And they both have probabilities, percentages associated to them. You could have the tool be more flexible and just have a little bit more margin in the response. You could say, the first three are acceptable, the first four, the first five. And the LLM will choose between those because it knows that all of them are acceptable. And you can give it a more creativity if you want to put a very human-like word on it. But the reality is that you need to know what your case scenario is to see if it makes sense to do that or not.
I was
Because
just
if
thinking,
I'm,
yeah,
yeah,
the use case depending on the business need. Yeah.
Yeah, if I need to provide some sort of like technical spec sheet information from an item that I have, I would probably not do that. But if I'm using a little LLM to write a book and I want it to be as creative as possible, maybe that makes sense. It's
Yeah.
just a matter of trial and error and see for the case scenario that I have what makes more sense.
Yeah. I'm conscious of time. This question, though, is a nice segue to the last part of this presentation, which is if AI doesn't really, it's quite funny the way they've worded this question. If AI doesn't really understand anything and only predicts the next word based on probabilities like autocomplete, if it's just guessing mathematical patterns and not consulting a database of real facts, even though that's debatable, how can we trust it to make serious decisions for our business?
Well, in that
That's not
case,
what we're
there's
really saying, right? We're not saying trust AIs to make decisions for your business, but
yeah, it's AI. It's part of it's just a cog on a huge machine. So the idea is that it's not going to be for many of the scenarios that you're determining, it shouldn't be used alone. There's got to be more things. There's got to be
that's right.
human intervention that basically makes sure that it is working. So you're starting off of the base of a tool that has been built upon hundreds of millions of data sets. So out of the box is already very, very good. But what you can do is you can basically give it specific subsections of data that you want to be more concentrated on, that assign it a higher weight. And there are things that basically we have loop right in front of me, which I think is a good segue. There's a term that is very famous that is called human in the loop. So
Well, it's in
basically,
it's in the coming slides. That's why I thought this is a
oh, let
great,
me
yeah,
let
because
me
we've
move
got
that to
hallucinations, which is part of something that can happen in AI. So this is why it's not, it can be wrong.
yeah. So in this case, I would say that the hallucinations basically happen that in the moment that you go through that entire probability scenario, but the output of it, because of those chances, it ended up being not adequate for many, many reasons. And what can happen is that it can happen just exactly the reason that's why we have it right here. It could happen because of flawed data, because again, I was saying just a little bit a while ago, it's been trained on anything and everything. So if I want to use, like, for example, Reddit, again, just to bring something that I mentioned earlier, it could have quite a lot of correct things, but at the same time, it could have a lot of things that are not correct. So that training data, it's incredibly important. And that's why you have seen sometimes in the news that people sell this data and they sell it for obscene amount of money. And depending on the quality of it, it could be valued even more. So this is a premium commodity as of this moment. Um, it had also happened, but that doesn't happen as much right now, right? But there were some scenarios in which those models, they had a specific cutoff date in which they were up to date in information up until a particular date. So what could happen is that you could query something for recent events and it wouldn't have that information. So it would continue to the next probabilistic answer. And of course, that answer is not going to be correct. Um, you could have, when you give it parameters, and either when you search something or in the system prompt side, that again, this is something that we're going to be discussing early on, it could have just contradicting information, and that could actually create conflicts. And then again, we discussed this a little bit ago, right? But that temperature threshold, like the variance in creativity that you want to give it, maybe you gave it too much, right? And that actually created that it gave a response that it's not accurate. And again, I'm going back to uh, the, the case that I mentioned before, that you need to check what are your scenarios and what is the temperature that you're actually okay with going. And then it could also happen that, let's say that you have a chatbot, right? You have a chatbot that it is associated to your particular brand, to your particular company, right? So you need to give it an idea of what it is and what it does. So, for example, I'm a chatbot and I answer pharmaceutical questions, if you want to put it that way. It has to be given context about it. So, what happens with that is that it could happen that when you gave it that context, you were lacking some information that if you gave it to it, it could have provided a correct response. Or what could happen as well is that you gave it too much information. So it was a bit drowned on the type of responses that were given. So that is just some of the reasons that, yes, it can hallucinate. We have a whole different module that basically goes through what you can do to avoid it. And I just wrote it below. And actually, very specifically, even though I just said it incorrectly, I wrote how to reduce them, because you will not be able to avoid them 100%. Because as I put in the subtitle, it's part of the feature. It's not a bug. Um, so I'm going to continue because we went a little bit over time, but I'm just going to go very fast. So in this case, these are the major providers that you are currently seeing everywhere. You have OpenAI, you have Anthropic, you have Google, you have Meta. Here, the important thing is that you need to know that they are not all good for the same thing. So you need to see your scenario and see, maybe it needs to be OpenAI. Maybe I code a little bit more. It needs to be Anthropic. Or maybe in my workplace, I have Google. So it makes sense to already integrate with Gemini. Those are the type of decisions that you need to make. And then you need to know the pricing of it. The reason as we went through the tokens is they're a key concept, but at the same time, that's mostly the way in which you're charged, pay per token. Now, going to that human in the loop concept that I just mentioned a bit before, let's have just three quick and easy examples of how this should work, right? I can have the AI draft an email. I should ideally have a human that reviews it and approves it, and that email gets sent. You can have it flag a suspicious transaction, or you can have it generate a product description. All of those, someone should be able to see it and just say, this is good, this is acceptable. If you repeat that enough times, you could have some scenarios in which you could say, I don't need to review this anymore. It can just be done automatically. And those are the ideal scenarios that will save you a huge amount of time. But you need to understand what is your tolerance for risk and which things are riskier than others. Maybe in this case, flagging a suspicious transaction, it could be much more risky than just creating a product description. But that's a decision for you to make. And it's not going to be just in these three, it could be for any part of your business. And these are some do's and don'ts of at least where not to use them out of the box. I would probably say that these are all usable, but for the don'ts, I would say that you will need to do some work on top of it, which that is very important. And there are quite a lot of capable people in this case that will be able to help you to bridge that gap to actually make AI feasible for all of the scenarios that I mentioned right here. Okay, so here we have a quick
I was gonna say,
poll.
given our time, we can probably skip the poll because I'm more interested in what we can do for the people that attended the webinar and what are the key takeaways they should take from today's,
I I like that.
besides the knowledge of tokens and the fact that this has been going on for a while, it's just been made accessible because of Transformer. Um, exactly. What could they do today?
Yeah. So I think I mentioned this a little bit a while ago, but I think it's worth being mentioned again. Garbage in, garbage out. So if you want to do something with this, I would say the first thing is that whatever it is that you use it for, the source data has to be in top tier shape. So you should be able to audit that data source, identify if it has any kind of issues, and if it has them, correct them. Once you do that and you choose what is going to be the aspect in which you want to have AI tackle it, just pick a pilot task. Ideally, it should be high repetition and the risk shouldn't be the highest, and worry more about speed rather than perfection. What we want to do is save you time. But the idea is that once you do your pilot task, you can start, once you get a successful scenario, you can start upping the stakes, the variables, the data source. And once you know it, you have a bunch of different scenarios in your company that are covered with AI and they work. Now, this is something that we're going to be dealing again in further um, webinars, but you will see that everyone is prognosticating what the future entails, right? And again, I think it was maybe difficult for us 4 years ago, 3 years ago to say that we would be here as of this moment. So, of course, some of these things are subject to change, but the idea and the way that we're aiming towards is just having agents that are basically they have a goal and they take a sequence of actions of action and they do it independently. And that could be escalated to have agents that take care of issues in your website or just overall requirements, and they interact with other agents. That's typically what it's being termed agentic commerce. And that is something that it's been heavily discussed. And you will see brands like, for example, BigCommerce or Shopify that are very much at the forefront of those type of things and investing quite a lot of money just to try to see if they can do it. And the reality is that we have seen quite a lot of promising things. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's where we're going. Um, and also, you have seen, for example, NetSuite that has released their own MCP, and that is also as well something that will be part of everything that we do. We have even done videos of what it is, how to actually activate it, and what you can use it for. And if I were to give you like three things to take away, is that AI is it's incredibly powerful. It's the most revolutionary technology probably in the last 30 years, but it is not magic. So once you know that, you know how to take leverage of it because you know how it works. So I would say take that into account and use it, put it into action. Um, Again, your data readiness is your AI readiness. If you have things that are incoherent in your backend, things that you need to add, things that are very different from one another, as I was saying, this is possible because of all of the data that it has to answer. If your data is not correct, it's not going to be good. So take that into account. And at least for a start, know where not to use it. Just start in those pilot cases, start building up from that, and you will do great.
Thank you, Marcelo.
Thanks,
I know,
everybody.
I know it's been quite a lot to digest, and I know we've gone overboard for a little bit, and I appreciate those that have been able to hang back. We will be sending out the AI glossary, and that will be in your inboxes after this. And as it was very much promised, we do have a little announcement to make. And we can probably stop sharing screens so people can see you for this, Marcelo, while you can tell them about this little surprise and announcement that we have for everybody.
Oh, do I need to show my face? Okay, I'll do
I,
it.
I
No, I'm
think
just kidding.
so. You're the face of it now. Yes.
Yeah. From our side, I think what we're seeing right now is that this is, it really is something that it's game changer. It is something that I don't think that we were able to forecast before. But what we see is there's there are limits to the tool that can definitely be helped with if you are surrounded by the right people, the right team with expert knowledge. Because of that, what we're going to be announcing today, what I'm announcing today, is that we are launching an AI studio that is going to be called Dolphia. And in the next few days, you're going to be seeing it all across social media. It comes from the same trusty people that you've known and loved for the last 15 years in Tavano. So that means that there's a business knowledge with NetSuite and everything that has come from those last 15 years. So the important thing with all of this is that if you ever want to integrate something, you need to have that business knowledge and you need to have that expert hand. So we want to inhabit that space and we want to be there for you. And that's the reason as of why we're building it. It is with the same expert people that we have. I am the director of it. You will be hearing much more about us in the next few days, but we have already built some products. We have helped quite a lot of companies already, even though we haven't announced it. We may have done it named as Tavano, but we're still part of the same family, and we're incredibly excited of the amount of things that we have built and the ways that we can help you. So be on the lookout in all of social media. Check out our website when we launch it. You will be able to see it. And again, it's a huge honor for all of us to be here today to announce it. I know that we have been Taiwan for many, many years, but in this last few months, we have launched two studios as well, along with the ROI Loop that you know already about it, and you're some of the people that I see right here are actually actively working with them. But again, we're still are all part of the same company. We just want to specialize a little bit in some areas. But again, it's very, very happy to announce it. And I hope you're excited as well, because if you ever interested in taking the leap in something, it doesn't have to be complex or anything, we'll be there to help you. We consider ourselves basically your AI adoption partner for anyone that wants to come in. So again, super happy. Thank you, Pia, for that time. I know that we've went over 10 minutes. My
And
apologies on that, but I hope
surprise,
that surprise was worth it.
everyone has stayed, and we really appreciate the partners that have stayed. I think they appreciate and they've worked with you, most of them, and they've seen the trajectory you've made, and they can now hear, at least get an insight into what AI is, the capacities it has. I know we seem to have downplayed it, but what we want to showcase is bring it to light. There have been AI winters, there have been AI summers. And with AI summers, there's obviously a lot of bright. So a lot of brightness, everything has come to light into the capacities it has. What Marcelo has really tried to bring here is it is a probability engine in itself. So what we're trying to say is use it as best as you can, but check the best case scenario and for what you want to use it for. And should you, because of the lack of time, which seemed to be a recurring answer, should you not have the time for that, talk to us because we can do the brainstorming. We can look at the data. We can see how to best put them into place. We're not going to turn this into a sales pitch. Marcel is going to do the sales pitch with you in another time. This was just a
Yes.
webinar. So, and we wanted to announce Dolphia because there's some very exciting things down the pipeline. So thank you for your time today. and we'll hopefully see you soon.
Thank you so much, everybody. It's been a pleasure.